Hi, everybody. Today we are going to do a very important topic, which is essentials of writing a research paper. I'm the editor-in-chief of Pakistan Journal of Ophthalmology, and we would like to have good quality articles. And for that, uh, an author needs to understand what needs to go in an article and how to write it appropriately. Let's see, if I say these three pictures. There's number one of them in which a lab experiment is being done. Is that research? Number two, in which an animal is being tested. Is that research? Number three, in a person who's having ECG done. Is that research? These three can be research or they can be also normal routine investigations as well or routine testing as well. Question is, research happens when something new is being created or something new is being derived from the data you're getting. For example, if the person above in the lab, if he is deriving a new gene for COVID, that is research, but he was just telling the alpha variant of COVID, that's probably not going to be research now because it's already known. Similarly, in if somebody's doing a sort of a gene study for retinitis pigmentosa, that can be research. But if somebody's just giving insulin for diabetes, that might not be research. Similarly, if the person is lying down, he's having his ECG done, if you're investigating myocarditis in COVID, that'll be research. But if you're investigating heart block on ECG in normal patients, probably it might not be research because everybody knows about those things. Before we go any further, let's define what is research. It is the systematic investigation into and study of material and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. So if something new is being formed, then it's research. So that is, and you can all, in layman's term, you can say is filling in the gaps in knowledge. That's what research is. So if you start off looking at the pyramid of research, and what they say is what you do nowadays is evidence-based practice. Whatever evidence you provide in your clinical studies, that becomes the research and that is used for clinical patient treatment. So if we look at the different levels of papers we have in different journals, so you start off with qualitative research, you can have pre and post-test studies, you can have single case design, then you can have quasi-experimental studies and randomized controlled trials, and the final tier of the ladder is systematic reviews. Systematic review on the topic would mean that if you are doing a review on age-related macular degeneration treatment with anti-VEGF, what you have to have looked at 30 or 40 papers in literature and find their different treatments and then compare them together and come with a conclusion that this is what is the conclusion. So systematic research is the highest tier, and that is taken as the highest level of evidence which you have. Then you come down on randomized control trial and quasi-experimental as for experimental studies. So what do you think, where do you fall? Usually we tend to fall on single case studies or quasi-experimental designs. But in order to have a higher ranking, you need to go on to higher levels. Then the other thing which is very basic for research is what is plagiarism? It's the practice of taking someone else's work of idea or ideas and passing them off as their own. So you can see the person is actually copying very nicely and putting it on a piece of paper, but he's not giving that person his credit that he is taking from that source. So what are the different types of plagiarism you can have? You can have global plagiarism, in which you're presenting an entire work text by text someone else as your own work. You're totally lying and it's serious. plagiarism. And then you're going to have paraphrasing plagiarism, rephrasing someone else's idea without citation. That's serious. Then you can have verbatim plagiarism, directly copying a passage of text without citation. That is again serious. Mosaic plagiarism is combining text and ideas from different sources without citation. That is again serious because all of these serious categories would fall. That means that you are presenting that work as your own thought rather than a combination of people's, different persons' thoughts. Then you go on to self plagiarism. If you write something else, it does not mean that you own it and you can use it as such. It as such for everything. Reusing passages and ideas from your own previously submitted work can only be done after you give a reference to that. That's moderate category. Then you have incorrect citation, failing to give all the necessary information in your source citation. That's moderate level of plagiarism. What is the effect of plagiarism? Can you be fired from your job if you're the head of the department? Yes, you can be if somebody proves that you had did plagiarism and you copied someone else's work. There have been examples in literature. So what do you need to do for that? Whenever you write research, always write the truth, and because it might be cited like 10 or 20 years down the line and you said nobody's watching me now. It's actually when you grow up the ladder, it becomes more visible to people and more people are sort of eyeing on what you do. Then is ethics. The World Medical Association approved the Declaration of Helsinki by stating it is the mission of the doctor to safeguard the health of the people. Ethics can be thought of as a social responsibility that the researcher has to a society at large. Ethics changes with expectation and legislature in society. So let's take an example. There's a patient who's a diabetic and you want to do, there are patients who are diabetic and who are coming in for treatment for proliferative diabetic retinopathy, and you are doing research on argon laser therapy. Well, it's established that argon laser therapy is going to prevent severe visual loss by 50%. So nowadays you cannot do research in which you would assign 50% of the patients to no laser and 50% to laser. That would become unethical. But this thing, 50 years back, when laser was not being used and the role was not established, it was research. You could do that because nobody knew if laser could be helpful or it could be not helpful. So it's a social responsibility. Then main thing is whenever you're doing research, you do not want to do any harm to the patient. Sometimes people have vested interest. Some people would be owners of pharmaceutical companies. And in order to sell their products, they would go any end because they've spent so much money to sell that thing. But you can see there have been lawsuits on big companies like Johnson and Johnson was sued for talcum powder because it had side effects and they did not sort of had studied those side effects and they did not tell the patients that these are the side effects that could cause cancer. So that is society as at large, which can make you responsible for unethical work which you do. Then comes in whenever you're writing a paper, there is always requirement by the journals that you should have a letter from the institutional review board or the institutional review board or the ethical review board. The institutional review board are responsible for protecting the health and well-being of research participants and are liable for research that they approve. So if somebody is being treated for suppose COVID nowadays and if the hospital agrees that all patients needs to be treated with remdesivir, then it's the institution which is approving that. But if they do not agree with that, then you cannot do research without the approval of the institution review board. But the other thing, the medical superintendent, the principals, those are the gatekeepers of the institution, the medical directors. And what they cannot do is they cannot sort of give permission to do something that would be harmful for the institution or that could sort of leak out data which would be inadvertent to the safety or the uh, integrity of the patients. So the IRB consists usually of at least 5 members, including at least 1 member in scientific research, 1 member in non-scientific research field, and 1 member who has no affiliation with the institution conducting research. That member would look at the face validity of the thing. A doctor might be biased and he might say that I want to approve this because it's going to be helpful for the institution, but the other person might say, well, if you look at from outside, this seems quite harmful or this does not seem appropriate study to be done. So that's the reason it has got these type of members. Then comes in conflict of interest. I mentioned before, a situation in which a person is in a position to derive personal benefit from the actions or decisions made in their official capacity. So if I am the head of the department and that research would make me head of the institution because that's the requirement for that, and I want to desperately publish that research, and I have a conflict of interest in that. So, and the results which I publish will be taken as with a pinch of salt. Similarly, if you go into international meetings, what they have over there is with the first slide, you will always have a presentation showing that I have no conflict of interest. The reason is, or they would say that I work for this company. The reason is, if they say they work for a company, then the audience who are listening to that talk, they are going to know that that person can be biased. So whatever they are listening from him, they have to be careful of what inference they make. But if they're hearing from somebody who has no conflict of interest, they know he's an impartial person and his probably whatever he's saying is going to be more authentic. Then we come on to choosing a research topic. I think that is the most difficult part for residents or trainees who coming in. So where do you go and what do you look for research? Because when you're starting research in your first year of training, you usually don't know what to do, or you're asking the consultant what to do, but the consultants sometimes are too busy or they do not know what level of training or understanding about research you have. So the best thing is, in order to do a research according to your aptitude, is look into introductory textbooks on research, annual review journals. So if you have a research journal, there are review journals that would give a review on that topic, and that offers comprehensive reviews of trends and significant developments. Then you have subjective listings. Using subject listings in an article of interest, you can conduct in more targeted. Then cited references in an article which you're seeing, which you think is more interesting, that can give you a lead to other related articles. Follow particular references forward in time. And where you find an article that is important to your research, you can look to see who has subsequently cited that article using online databases. And from there, you want to know what is going to be more acceptable for that journal, or how am I going to produce something which is new. Then we come on to, if I am a journal editor, what papers will I accept or reject? So accepted papers would cover important topics, data are novel, paper is relevant to the journal's readers, is well written, covers an emerging and topical subject, and covers a neglected area. So if something which is like in this era of COVID, there was a big opportunity for the authors who were doing research to publish on this topic because nobody knew about COVID and this was research. Similarly, if you have a new machine in your department or in your specialty, that is an ideal thing to do research on. So if you have a 3 Tesla MRI scan with high resolution images, probably you can do research on that thing rather than doing it on 1 Tesla machine. So rejected articles are not important, not new enough. Usually they say if you did a research 5 years ago, they would not publish your paper because they say it's too late and not sufficiently interesting for the journal readers or too subspecialized, poorly written, and the findings difficult to apply clinically. So it should be very applicable to what you want. Let's look at where you would find the 100 most cited, frequently cited articles in ophthalmology journals. So if you want to do a research in gynecology, you can just type in on Google that 100 most frequently cited journals in gynecology journals, and that would give you a list. From there, you would start to sort of shortlist your interest in publication. So I know AMD, glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, OCT, those are the things which are being published very regularly. So I will go and look into those areas, and wherever I find an area about research, I'll start on that topic. Suppose it's cataract, it's so common and they're not anything new happening at the moment, you might not have research. The reason is diabetic retinopathy is research because you've got gene therapy, you've got newer medications coming in, and you've got newer treatments coming in all the time. That's why it's research. Know the literature as well as your peers because your peers are your peer reviewers and they are going to authorize your research. So, peer reviewed journals, wherever you go, you publish, they'll be peer reviewed. Familiar with the field and knowledge gaps because knowledge gaps is research. Read discussion conclusion of other papers because that is very important. That is where you pick up what is research. Read reviews, editorials. They give you an insight of critical analysis of different things and what are unanswered questions. Read limitations of other papers. You do not want to undergo those limitations in your paper, or you try to minimize those limitations and talk to people. Sometimes it's a good idea to present your paper in different small meetings. From there, you get feedback from different people. Then, actually, with that, you can solve your problems in that article, and obviously, you can write a better paper and you'll get less problems during peer review. Then, when writing a paper, find a model paper. Papers being published, something right, closely look, results, tables, and layout. Limitations, can you do better? So if I want to publish a paper on OCT and want to see choroidal thickness in central serous retinopathy in OCT, so I'll find the best paper with the largest data and I try to see what they did, what was deficient, and what else can be done. And I would try to structure my paper around that because sometimes whatever outcome variables you're going to produce or you measure, you don't know about. Sometimes questionnaires are there which have been piloted and you can use them for your paper. Define the research question. Research question is different from the purpose of your study. Recognize background assumptions, form testable hypotheses, ensure the hypothesis is falsifiable, and identify the outcome variables. So let's see what would be a research question. Let's see if we are studying, say, myocarditis is produced due to COVID. So our hypothesis is severe COVID patients will get myocarditis. So that is our research question. But our purpose of the paper is not going to be that. Our purpose would be we would round that up around some variables. So the degree of, so our purpose is to find the frequency or the prevalence of um, myocarditis in patients with severe COVID. So that would be the purpose of the study, or you could say the severity of T wave depression in patients with the COVID. That could be the purpose, one purpose of the study. Be clear and focused. What is the study question? What is your hypothesis? Write in an active voice. The purpose of our study is not the purpose of this study is. Our study showed that, not that this study showed. Simple stand sentence and avoid abbreviations. Check and recheck grammar and spelling, nouns and verbs should agree. The data are None is. I think more important now, you've got tools on the internet. Grammarly is a good software you can use if your grammar is poor, or you can ask somebody who's fluent in English to help you with writing the paper, because good language written with no spelling mistakes is a key to getting a paper accepted. Ask yourself, why are you conducting the research? Are you getting paid and might have a conflict of interest? Are you trying to achieve some form of end goal or outcome? Whatever the agenda may be, being honest with yourself and acknowledge the possible biases. So, if you say that most important bias is you get when you do the sampling, because with sampling you need to have, if you're doing two groups, you need to have equal groups. Sometimes you do convenient sampling. That is why convenient sampling has bias, because you might choose patients which you think would benefit more from treatment rather than from not benefit from treatment. But if you do a randomized control trial, you remove that bias. So double blind or randomized control, randomization with the lottery method, electronic method, whatever way you choose, that would actually remove the best bias. Then you come on rationale versus the purpose of the study, which is different. Rationale is a related term of purpose. Rationale is as explanation of the basis or fundamental reasons for something, while purpose is an object to be reached, a target, an aim, a goal. So if we say in patients that our purpose is to study the ECG or the severity of ECG changes in patients with COVID in tertiary care hospital, that is our purpose. But our rationale would be to identify patients of severe myocarditis in COVID. So that would be the rationale, and the purpose would be to actually identify some outcome variable in it. Then choosing a research methodology. Either you can do a quantitative research or a qualitative research. People think qualitative research might be simpler, but actually it is much more complicated, and you need to do a lot of calculations which are not the routine calculation. Simple research is quantitative, in which you have numbers and you can compare numbers, and you need to get statistical results, because all international or good article journals usually want statistical analysis. And for statistical analysis, nothing better than quantitative research. You can do experimental research or non-experimental research. Non-experimental research would be cross-sectional studies such as prevalence, incidence, or the distribution of these of different diseases, while qualitative research is less focused on numerical measurements and generally are more focused on meaning. Researchers employing this approach are interested in participants' subjective experience. So suppose if you have qualitative research, you might have the perspectives of students regarding online teaching during COVID. That is qualitative research, in that you need to probably do interviews of students and ask them what did they like, what they did not like. You need to have survey questions. So you might have to collate data, you might have to add quantitative and qualitative data to get good research. And the most important thing, if we can understand this, probably our paper writing becomes much easier. What is population and what is sample? A population refers to the entire group of individuals relevant to your research. A population is a moving target that depends on your research question. A sample is a subset of individuals drawn from the population of interest. So whenever you're doing, you take that small sample size. So the population might be 10 million, but you're taking a sample size of 1,500, depending on what are the results of the previous study. So sample size calculators are there, like EPI. So those can tell you, but the main important thing is your samples should be of adequate size. So when you give your results, those results should be as good for this sample as they would be for the population. Suppose if I say a patient endophthalmitis or infection in the eye is seen in 1 in 1,000 patients after cataract surgery. So for that, a sample size of less than 1,000 is not going to be reliable, because if you took 900, what happened to the 1%, one patient who was going to develop? You probably might not see him, and then your sample is not adequate or is not representative of the population which you have, because all your research is going to be generalizable on the population so that you can apply that knowledge or research on the population. You say that this medication, ciprofloxacin, is ineffective for typhoid. If that is good on a representative sample population across the country, across the world, then you can freely apply to all people around the world. Write in simple language. Vary present, past tense, but be careful. Present tense to report introduction that is established and for work that you want to do. Dementia, like example, dementia is a major cause of disability in older people. In this study, we examined the hypothesis that smoking is associated with dementia. Past tense in discussion to describe results of a specific study, especially your own. We found that smoking was associated with check English or American spelling, edema versus edema. Few studies versus a small, large number of studies. We asked the question versus we asked, this appears to be versus this seems, on the other hand, versus conversely. So, what are the different components of the paper? Abstract is the most important because all the editors, even if you are a reader, first thing you want to see is scan that journal and see the abstract is most important. Introduction is the second most important. Then you've got methods, results, discussion, and the third, which is the third most important, and references and tables and figures. Let's go through the different parts. Invest in your abstract. First impression counts. Many editors, reviewers decide just based on that single abstract whether to accept or reject that paper. Conclusion of abstract should be supported by the data in the abstract. Suppose if your paper is about the effect of insulin on controlling diabetes, your conclusion cannot be that this medication is effective for hypertension. Your study is on diabetes, so the conclusion needs to be on diabetes. Let's see, this is a patient, age-related macular degeneration and risk for stroke. So background, so in this you see the back, some article journals would like background, but some don't. So you have to see which journal you are submitting to. Then you've got your objective, you've got your study design, settings, patients, measurements, results, limitations, conclusions. This is an elaborate abstract, but usually the abstracts would have a purpose, study design, and the place and duration of study, the methodology, results, and conclusion, and then keywords. So, what thing can you do? This is a sort of a metaphor, that elevator lift with us. So you have a short period of time. How can you project your journal? You can get a good pitch to your article by producing a good introduction. Short and sharp, get to the point, maximum one double space page, 3 paragraph. First paragraph should be 5 lines maximum, state problem or disease, 1 line, 1 to 2 references, state impact or significance, 2 lines with 3 to 5 references, state uncertainty in literature. So you want to see, if you want to see age-related macular degeneration, you would say this is age-related macular degeneration, a disease which has got this impact on blindness in patients. And then you will see this part, genetic studies are not being done, and this is not clear in literature about this disease. So we are going to do a study on this. So, like in introduction, diabetic retinopathy is a microvascular complication in people with diabetes, and we can be divided into non-proliferative and proliferative form. The clinical features of non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy include microaneurysm, retinal hemorrhages. Studies show that proliferative diabetic retinopathy is the most common microvascular complication of the disease. So this is paragraph which has been written, which is longer in size and it is not focused. So in order to make it focused, you can say diabetic retinopathy is the leading cause of blindness among working age people. Despite progress in the disease, the risk factors that predict the development of diabetic retinopathy are incompletely understood. So there comes your rationale that the development of diabetic retinopathy is incompletely understood. Then you go on to the second paragraph. You review literature to support uncertainty. Did the study answer a key question? Are there conflicting results and limitations of previous studies? And then you come on to the third paragraph, which gives you the purpose of study in a line, and in current study, we examine. So example in AMD and stroke. So the importance of the problem is age-related macular degeneration and stroke affect significant number of older patients. AMD is the most common cause of blindness, and AMD strokes have been suggested to have common pathological mechanisms. Emerging research suggests that inflammatory process and genes coding for stroke may be linked with AMD. So you're trying to link the two diseases together and review uncertainty in existing literature. There have been few studies that have been directly examined the relationship between AMD and stroke. These studies have not been able to demonstrate a consistent association. There are no prospective data on whether individuals with AMD are at a higher risk of stroke. So the purpose of the study is to describe the relationship of AMD to incident clinical stroke. So you can see in this three paragraphs how well the introduction have been described. Make clear the links between problem and your proposed solution, unanswered question and your proposed answer, prior research and your current answer. Be selective, not exhaustive, in choosing studies to cite. The more relevant an article to your study, the more space it deserves in journals. Then, whenever you're citing any reference, that reference needs to be relevant. It cannot be that you're citing a reference for diabetic retinopathy and the reference below is of gout. That's not acceptable. The journals will reject that. So then you come onto key sentences. Introduce a concept. Emerging evidence suggests it has been hypothesized that. Introducing studies. Data from these studies show that. Recent studies indicate that. Introducing limitations. These studies, however, are limited by. Introductory uncertainty. Whether X is related to Y is unclear. Few studies have been conducted in older women. People were the risk factors for Y may be different. Then you come on to methods and results. What, whose, and what's. So, what is the study design? Who is the study population? When is the time frame? Where is the location? Then you need to also give the inclusion, which people you are including in the study and which you are excluding in the study. Any factor that you describe in the results table must be included here. Reporting of statistical data. Do not state statistical technique that you did not use. You need to tell them about the statistical package software. If there's SPSS, then you need to give the version of SPSS which you're using. Clearly state primary and secondary analysis. We perform the following subsidiary analysis. First, we stratified the result by. Clearly state factors you adjust for and values and unit. We adjusted for age, years, gender, blood pressure, diabetes. Report p-value up to 3 decimal places and report highly significant values as p is less than 0.01. So in results, give an overview, specify data, guide of figure and table, clearly describe the most important data, do not interpret data or give conclusion in results, repeat all data in tables and figures in text. So either you can give, what is the best way is to give your results in a table and then out of the table get the most important inferences and write them as text in the result. Do not sort of, what people do is whatever they have in the table, sort of they reduplicate the data in the results, which is not correct. Picture is worth 1,000 words, so figures are preferable to tables and tables are preferable to straight text. Then the 6 C's of discussion. The last but the most important part of the second last part is discussion. The first paragraph you clarify, you summarize the most important finding. What do you conclude in that in your paper? Suppose AMD and stroke. So what you say is that you summarize that there is an association between the two, both are pathologically related to each other and the genes are the same. So that's why our findings suggest that these number of patients had stroke and these have AMD. So it's going hand to hand together. In the second, you compare the results are consistent. If consistent, a study further supports existing data. If different, a study shows that discuss for unexpected finding. So suppose your study, you have very little correlation between stroke and AMD, while another study, there was a big correlation. The difference could be that study was done in the West, so that the behavior of the disease might be different in your population. So that can be an explanation for the unexpected finding. But sometimes, most of the time, the results are the same, and which sort of supports the other study that your study is correct as well. The third paragraph, consider what are the plausible explanations linked with basic science. And in the fourth paragraph, you see the contribution, clinical and research implications, treatment and prevention implications, future studies, and don't overgeneralize. And in the fifth paragraph, you give caveats about study design, study population, and measurement. And the last paper, conclusion, cut and paste your first paragraph and rephrase that a clear and consistent message. Let's see, we go through the example. The first paragraph, what we clarified as I discussed before, our study showed that persons with AMD are more likely to develop a stroke than persons without AMD. The association was independent of age, gender, race, diabetes, blood pressure, and was even seen for both ischemic and hemorrhagic stroke. The second is you compare with other studies. Previous cross-sectional studies have not been able to identify a link between AMD stroke. In cardiovascular health study, these extends our observation by showing these early AMD signals are incident clinical stroke in middle-aged patients. Then in third stage, you give considerations. There are several potential explanations for these associations. Atherosclerosis, one of the risk factors for stroke, has been postulated to be a pathogenic mechanism in the development of AMD. A second potential mechanism linking AMD to stroke is. And the fourth paragraph, you give the contribution of your research. Our study findings that individuals with early AMD or high risk of stroke may have potential research and clinical implications. Substantiated by further research, a study may prove further rationale for the use of antioxidant supplements in individuals with early AMD. In fifth paragraph, what are the cons? Strengths of the study include a prospective study, a study population drawn from community, standardized AMD evaluation photograph, validated assessment of incident and stroke cases, and detailed information. And the sixth paragraph is the conclusion. In summary, we demonstrate an association between the two diseases. And given the substantial number of persons with AMD, further research is clearly needed to determine the significance of this association. And the limitation of this study would be that it's a single center or small center study, so that you need to do more studies which have got more population sample. So in order to get a good sample, if there's a study of incidence or prevalence in Pakistan, you need to have an equal representation or equal population representation from different provinces and different races across the country. If it is an incident study of Pakistan, you cannot say that this hospital, the study was done in this hospital and this is an incident study. A hospital-based study would usually be a frequency-based study. Then references matter. Be selective, not exhausted in choosing the references. Read the latest reviews and include the most important references. Journals would like most of the reference to be less than 5 years old. Cite highest impact journals. Cite articles in the journals you are submitting. Cite potential reviewers. The more times a reviewer is cited, the higher the chance of acceptance. Reviews influence. This is an article which shows that our review is influenced by citations of their own work, evidence from International Journal of Epidemiology, proceeding of Fifth International Congress. So they are. So be sure to sort of include those reviewers. Then the style of references, which is sort of accepted by different journals, is Vancouver, Harvard, APA is American Psychological Association, and MLA is Modern Language Arts. So Vancouver, you have the author. The last name of the author comes first, and the first name comes as an abbreviation. So it's Breivik H. And then after that, you give the title of the study. So Nordic Guidelines for Neuroaxial Blocks. and then you give the name of the journal. So the journal would be Acta Anesthesiol Scandinavia. So every journal has got its own abbreviation. So be sure to use that abbreviation. So this could be actually the Acta Anesthesiology Scandinavia, but that's not written over here because you need an abbreviation. Then you give the year, which is 2010. Then you give the volume number, which is 54. And then volume number is the year which is in published. So every journal, whichever year it's being published, it'll have different volumes. Then the issue number is, if it's number one, if it's a monthly journal, it will be January issue, and then you have the page number 16 to 41. But the other thing is, if you have numbers which are bigger, like if it was 1624, then you would write 1624 to 1626 rather than writing 1624 to 26. So that is the correct way of doing it. Then the other, you have the Harvard style. If you do papers with UHS, they like this. With this, you come with the author name first, and then you have the year of publication. So that gives you the relevance, how sort of a new reference you have cited. And then you have got the title and then the volume number and the page number. In the APA is the American Psychological Association, which is slightly different from this one. So here you can see DOI is also given. So which is DOI is called Digital Object Identifier. So if you click on a DOI of a paper, it will automatically, just by the click of a button, it will automatically take you to that article straight away, the full text or the abstract of the article. If it's a paid article, you'll have to pay and then see the full text thing. In Modern Language Association is MLA, so in which you give the name of the author is slightly different from the others. So design, formatting, and presentation is critical, shows the respect for your work, for the reviewer and the journal, indirect reflection of your science. Please look at the demand or the requirements of each journal you're submitting to. Some journals mostly would have a total word limit for the article. So might have a 2,000 or 2,500 or 3,500 word count. So you need to finish that count. You cannot submit an article longer than that. A good article or good paper will have 20 to 25 references. So, and these references will be split between introduction and the discussion. You usually do not have references in methodology and the results. The final checklist, does the paper read well? Is it interesting? Are sentences structure simple? Is the paper formatted nicely? Measure a paper to the journal you're submitting to. And finally, ask yourself, if you were the editor, will you publish this paper? This is the key. If you are able to perceive or imagine that, then your work is mostly done. So thank you very much for watching and hope you've had some understanding of how to write research. This is a basic introductory talk, and we'll come back with different small further talks later. Thank you very much for watching.